up, guys? It's Meg, and it's that time of the week again where we get to talk about the best show on television, AMC's The Walking Dead. Today we're talking about Season 5, Episode 3, called Four Walls and a Roof. What did you guys think of the episode last night? It was great. I loved it. I loved that there was sad moments and there were horrifying moments, and just the whole thing was really well put together. There are a couple parts that I didn't really like, but we'll get into that in a minute. Let's start with the tainted meat scene. Did it live up to your guys' expectations? I was pleasantly surprised by it. Lawrence, the actor for Bob Stuckey, played it brilliantly. Like, I was so convinced by his maniacal laughing and him screaming tainted meat and you're eating tainted meat. Like, I was a little bit skeptical after seeing the last episode, episode 2, where they kind of cut it off right in the middle of what was happening and we didn't hear the tainted meat scene. I was really skeptical as to whether or not they would be able to pull it off, and pull it off in not a cheesy way. Like, I was really worried that it was going to come across cheesy, and I was like, what? Tainted meat? Like, that's weird. But I was very pleasantly surprised at the great acting skills by Lawrence. It was amazing. A really great scene. I liked that the hunters acted really horrified by it. Some of them were kind of puking in the background, and Gareth was insisting that they cooked it. It's fine. You know, it was just it was perfect. It was a really great scene. And we see once the group realizes that Bob is missing and Daryl and Carol are missing, they kind of think that it is all, you know, they're all missing together. And so they don't know what happened to Daryl and Carol, and they assume that they have also been taken. There's a moment there, you know, where they're talking about fighting, and Abraham is like, I've got to get out of here. I've got to take Eugene and leave. And, you know, he doesn't care because he's not really emotionally attached to Daryl or Carol or Bob. You know, he has a mission and he's got to succeed in that mission, and that is getting Eugene to Washington, D.C. And Eugene doesn't even really want to leave, but, you know, Abraham's like, pretty much, you're coming. Like, it doesn't matter what you say. Maggie and Glenn and Tara make a promise to Abraham that if he stays, that they will all go with him and help him on his mission to Washington, D.C. And I have to tell you, I was really upset to hear this. For one, Maggie, you don't even care about your sister. Daryl told you that she's alive but gone. It was just a little bit frustrating, and that's me being kind of emotionally attached to the people in my life. I don't know that it would be that easy for me to know that a family member is alive but still be able to leave them behind. But then again, 2 years into the apocalypse, and I think a lot of our characters are a lot more hardened than they used to be, and that's something that I haven't experienced. So I have to kind of remind myself that I am not in the same situation as them. So even though I feel like she should be looking for her sister, even though she has no idea where to look, I don't know. I think it's gonna be kind of sad when Beth comes back and Maggie's gone, but whatever. And I was also just a little bit upset that we finally got our group back together, and in the first episode everybody's kind of talking like, we don't want to split up again. We finally got we finally got everyone back together. And then in the second episode, it's like Rick's saying, this is my family, and now there are like 4 separate groups. It's so frustrating. So we have Rick and Co. still at the church waiting for Daryl and Carol to come back. We have Daryl and Carol out chasing after a car that potentially took Beth. We have Beth at the hospital, and we have Abraham and Eugene and Rosita and Tara and Maggie and Glenn on the way to DC. So there are just so many different groups and so many storylines, and I know that we're gonna get episodes like without Maggie and Glenn and without Rick and Co. and without Beth and stuff, and so it's just frustrating. It feels like the second half of season 4 all over again. I don't know, it'll probably be interesting. We finally see Bob gets left. The hunters bring Bob back to the church, which was a great iconic scene from the comics, and I loved that there were a lot of shots from this episode that were straight from the comics, but they didn't follow the comics entirely. Which I thought was great. They put a twist on how the hunters die. The hunters came, and Gareth came to the church and is kind of hunting them in the church and kind of playing eeny, meeny, miny, moe with the 2 doors. And then Judith gives away their location, and I was like, this is why you don't have a baby in the apocalypse. just gonna throw that out there because they're gonna get you killed. And I think that this is like one of the only times we have had Judith cry where it has really affected the group. Like, it gave away their location, and I've said from the very beginning it's going to be difficult for them to be on the run from the prison with a baby, and yet she never cried really, hardly at all. I mean, she's cried a few times, but it was one of those perfect moments where, you know, babies are not quiet all the time, and I was kind of excited and yet frustrated and scared that Judith gave away their location. And I actually thought that Rick and co really left the church, and I was so shocked that they would leave kind of their best or their weaker fighters at the church with Judith, you know, and take all their good fighters with them. And then I realized that they were the ones setting the trap, not the hunters. They had kind of reversed roles there, and it was fantastic. The showdown with Rick and Gareth was amazing. Gareth was begging for his life, and Rick, you know, Rick had shot off his fingers, and then Rick keeps his promise and kills him with the machete, and it was so brutal and horrifying. And you could see Tyrese in the corner, and Father Gabriel was like, "Gah!" And Tyrese had that perfect horrified look on his face that he always does. And even Maggie and Glenn were in the background, kind of not participating in the brutality that was taking place there. And oh, I forgot, at the very beginning, before Bob starts cackling and laughing about the tainted meat, Gareth says, "We marked our way here so we could find our way back." And that leads me to believe that the markings on the trees were from the hunters, originally Gareth and his group, and they've made these marks because at the end of the first episode, when we saw Morgan, if you pause, you know, if you have a clear television and you pause at that moment when Morgan starts to walk past the first tree, there are multiple trees in the background that also have that circle with the X through it. So it was clearly a path leading somewhere, and it looks like Morgan decides to follow it. Well, this would explain how, you know, we know that there is a time jump there where that scene from Morgan is 1 to 2 months, I can't remember how many, 1 to 2 months in the future, meaning those marks weren't there when Rick and crew originally left the train tracks there. So I now assume that these marks were from Gareth and his crew as they hunted Rick, and they marked their way so they could find their way back. Why they would want to go back to Terminus is kind of beyond me because it's pretty much destroyed, but maybe they were planning on cleaning it up. I need to watch the episode again because I kind of missed a little bit of the conversation in the beginning. But that leads me to believe that those marks are from the Terminus people, and that 2 months later, Morgan is going to follow those, and they're going to at least lead him to the church. And somehow, you know, somehow he is going to then figure out where Rick and crew have gone. Somehow he's going to find them, and I think that he's probably potentially going to save them from some kind of situation, and it's going to be a crazy reunion for Rick to see Morgan again, because that's kind of where the comics deviated. Now, if you don't want a potential, it's not even really a big spoiler from the comics, but I'll say it quickly. Turn this off now or fast forward it for a few minutes if you want to avoid any comic spoilers. But in the comics, if I remember right, Rick goes and finds Morgan and brings him there, you know, with them. I'm pretty sure that's what happens. And here, you know, Rick had already gone back and found Morgan in the episode Clear, you know, way back in, what was that, season 3? So now he, you know, he's not trying to look for Morgan anymore. He's not trying to contact Morgan on the radio. He left Morgan behind because Morgan was crazy back then, and he wouldn't come with him. So he kind of, you know, it's a lost cause. I don't think Rick ever expected to see Morgan again. So I think it's going to be really interesting when Morgan finally shows back up and sees Rick. I think Rick's going to be really shocked that Morgan is somewhat sane and has found them. That was a little side diversion there. Did anybody think that Bob's death was really drawn out? I appreciated so much the fact that the group got to say goodbye to him and Sasha got to kind of comfort him in his last moments. I loved that, don't get me wrong. But he was dying like the entire episode. Like, get it over with already. I don't know. it was a little much. But, you know, we don't often in the Walker apocalypse get to say goodbye to our loved ones. So it was nice that it wasn't, you know, a super quick death like Herschel, where Herschel's death wasn't even quick. He suffered quite a bit, but, you know, nobody got to say goodbye to him, and that was really awful. So it was nice to finally get to be able to say goodbye to a character. And poor Sasha, there's been a lot of talk as to whether or not Sasha will be the next Andrea, based off of the comics. That would be great. I definitely see that happening. I'm not really going to go into that because that contains a lot of kind of potential comic spoilers for you guys, and I'm avoiding spoilers at the moment, and I don't want to spoil things for you. So Maggie and crew, they keep their promise. Maggie, Glenn, and Tara leave with Abraham on the way to Washington, D.C. Abraham leaves Rick a map, so we know, hopefully, they will eventually get back together. It just kind of makes me sad that we have these separate groups now. Yeah, we know from the Comic-Con trailer that the church bus that Abraham and the group is in crashes. And there were some scenes of a fire truck and fighting off tons of zombies. We don't call them zombies, walkers. Fighting off a ton of walkers. So we know a lot of stuff's gonna happen with them. A little bit worrisome. Hopefully we don't lose any of those characters. And at the very end, Daryl comes out of the woods, and Michonne sees Daryl, and he's not with Carol, and there's somebody in the woods with him, and he says, "Come on out," and we don't see who it is. And I was so shocked to see that Daryl was back so soon. It's only been a full day. Like, what? What has happened? I don't know. Unfortunately, I now know who comes out of the woods with Daryl because one of my viewers decided to spoil it for me, you guys, and told me who comes out of the woods. I'm not going to say it to you guys, and I am not going to do a dead ahead predictions video because that same person also said pretty much exactly what happens in the next episode, which was super frustrating. But yeah, I'm not going to do a dead ahead video because there's no point in me predicting things when I know what's going to happen, and I don't want to tell you what's going to happen as a prediction because that would be lying to you guys, and I don't want to do that. So sorry about that. Hopefully that doesn't happen in the future. It's really disappointing when episodes get spoiled for me. Makes me really sad. I almost cried about it, but I'm kind of an emotional person, so that's bound to happen. I am so excited, though, I will tell you, to finally see Beth again. I know there are not a lot of Beth fans out there probably that watch my videos. There's probably a few of you, but I'm very, very excited to see what's happening to her, and I'm really interested to see her on her own. You know, she doesn't have anyone protecting her. She's always kind of been in the background of all the seasons, and except for season 4, the second half, she was with Daryl, but Daryl was protecting her. You know, she wasn't really fighting or anything, and now she's on her own in this hospital that's probably like not a good place. Based off of the commercials, it does not seem like a good place, and she's on her own, and she's got to figure out how to get out of there. And based on the New Zealand promo for next week's episode, it looks like something's happened to Carol as well, and Beth sees it. So I don't know, guys. It's gonna be a crazy episode, but I'm really excited to see more Daryl and Carol and Beth, and we'll see what happens. That's it for today. If I missed anything, which I probably did because this is all unscripted, leave me comments down below and I will tell you what I think. I hope you guys have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you guys so much, and I really appreciate those of you who respect me and don't put spoilers in the comments. At the very least, put like a big spoiler warning, like spoiler, 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 if you want to talk to someone else about it, because I do get these alerts in my email because I want to respond to you guys. Like I love that I get alerts on my phone when you guys are talking to me, so I have a chance to respond. I don't ever want it to be that I make videos and completely ignore the comment section. I hate it when people do that. In other videos that I comment on, I like to have that connection with the person who's making the video. I think that's the great thing about YouTube, is we all make these connections and friendships with each other, and we're kind of all bonded by this one amazing show, and I love that. End rant. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.